Rev up your engine. Okay, here's the problem with modern cars. You can try to fix them yourself, but a lot of times it won't work because they have to be reprogrammed for stuff. Now, here we got a Chevy. He changed the cam sensors and it's running crummy. Well, you gotta mess with computers with these modern things. So I'm gonna show you how it's done. The Chevy V6 VVT engine has all kinds of sensors. 1, 2, 3, 4. He changed all of them except for this one, and now it's acting weird. So we're gonna put our computer on and see what happens. Enough to plug it in the data port here, and we'll turn it on. We'll do a standalone diagnosis. Always do the scan first just to see what's happening. Read the VIN that fast. 2012 passenger car Chevy Impala. We can do a topology scan, so we're gonna do that right away. And while we're doing it, the dash still hung up, it's not cracked. Seats are still pretty comfy. Typical with Impalas, there are all kinds of codes popping up. He only cares about the running, so that's what we're going to look at. So we're not going to look at the airbag system and all that stuff. Got 19 codes, including HVAC codes. Obviously, the AC doesn't work. He has the windows rolled down. What he wants to know is, why is it running poorly? So we'll start with the ECM. The correlation for the crank isn't correlated right. You can see all these things are not correlated. It says there's also a problem with the sensor circuits, but we're going to do something first. We're going to erase all the codes. Then we're going to do what you have to do if you replace those camshaft sensors. We have to correlate them. So we go back to the main data and we do special functions, and in this case the special function is crankshaft position variation learn. So we start her up, accelerate to wide open throttle, then it cuts off. Continue. Continue again. Set the parking brake. Only it doesn't work anymore. That could be a problem. Like I say, I don't advise buying these Impalas. They're not very good cars. But cycle ignition from off to on. Apply brake pedal. Start and idle the engine. There we go. Vehicles in park. Okay. Malfunction present or enable conditions are not met. Okay? It will not reset it. So let's take it for a spin. See what comes back. Seems to run okay now. It might have reset some of it, who knows? We'll take it for a little spin, then we'll check the data. If we road test it enough, we'll see if any pertinent codes come back for the ECM. But really, it's not running that bad now. It might have recorrelated some of it. An old Impala like this, hey, you never know. You can have all kinds of problems. If it has at least reset some of it, it runs okay, well, he's going to live with that. Take him down Tobacco Road here. It really is running pretty good. It must have correlated some of it. The ABS light's on. The anti-lock brake system isn't working right. Tire pressure sensor monitor isn't working. The traction control isn't working. But we step on the gas. Not running bad, really. It must have correlated because it was running bad before. Even though the computer said it wasn't done doing its job, it's obviously done some of its job. Look, we got past somebody. Smooth acceleration, no jerkiness. Hey, running quite smoothly. Hey, maybe at least correlated the part we needed correlated. I'll give it that. Now, a lot of times when you're road testing it, if you just road test it once, it won't trip any codes. So we're going to go up here. We're going to shut it off for a few minutes, start it up, take another road test. She's got the heat turned on. I'm turning that off. It's too hot in here. The heat works, but the AC doesn't. Typical again for an Impala. A little pull over here, shut off the engine for a few minutes. Off it goes. Now, sometimes it takes various trips in order to get codes go, but if you do a couple of trips, 2 or 3 of them maybe, and the code doesn't come back, then it's running good enough. This is Tennessee, they don't do emissions testing. If it reset most of it, hey, that's good enough. On a normal car, the machine would have reset it and be fine, but either there's another problem with this that isn't fixed, so it continued to not correlate, or it actually correlated enough that it runs okay. To wait 5 minutes, we'll start it back up again. Give it a little gas, then we'll look around. People drive like maniacs around here. Nobody's coming. And here we go back. Aha, the check engine light has come back on. Like I say, that's good. Now we can go back and look at the data again. It's warning us. It's still running okay though. It's really good enough for one of these old clunkers. Realize that sometimes you might have to drive it for a few days, but in this case the check engine light came right back up on the second trip, so that'll show us what's going on. Now you gotta consider this thing's got 180,000 miles. It's generally the lifespan of these cars before they really start falling apart. We're back and we can look at the data again. It's Scantos because the other one had all the historical codes I don't care about. I only want the new ones. Crankshaft position, not plausible. Exhaust camshaft. Crankshaft intake position, not plausible. Not plausible, not plausible. The system is all messed up. I erased the codes and every single one of them came right back. So in the case of this car, it runs good enough. To fix it is going to cost probably a small fortune. I looked at it, it looks like the wiring's going bad, the computer might be going bad. You changed 3 of the 4 cam sensors, but not one of them, and not the crank sensor. So if it's running as smooth as this, you can see, not shaking at all in idle. But the ABS doesn't work. The traction control doesn't work. The TPMS doesn't work. They don't do state emissions testing in Tennessee. This is something that, with this kind of mileage on a car like this, unless you want to spend a whole bunch of money tracing the wiring, replacing every sensor, then praying the computer hasn't gone bad when you have to buy a computer and reprogram it, it runs good enough for an old worn-out Impala that has almost 200,000 miles on it. 9 months ago, he paid $1,100 for it. You could easily spend more than that, and it runs okay. It's Tennessee. You don't need emissions, as you can see by that truck going by. You don't even need mufflers here. I would say just drive it. Now, if you have a normal car and say one of your cam sensors went bad, they're easy to replace, just plug in, plug out, but you gotta have a machine like I had or pay a mechanic to recalibrate the system. You can't just go change the cam sensor or crank sensor. It has to be recorrelated. It doesn't take long when it works, but as you saw what the computer said, this thing still has a problem, and since that is a problem, it can't finish the correlation because there's a problem. Something, probably the wiring from my experience with these things. But, I mean, hey, an $1,100 car, how much money are you going to put it in? It runs, you put gas in it, it goes around, you know. It came pre-dented and everything, so really, drive it until the wheels fall off, then abandon it. Gosh, you're not going to put a bunch of money into it. But for anybody else, hey, you got to change those sensors out. You got to have them correlated. Now, there's cheaper machines than my fancy ones that do it. I use the best one because I want the quickest results, but you can buy machines that'll do correlations for as little as a couple $100. It's not that big of a deal for these American cars. Just realize, if you didn't fix the problem with the sensor, it won't allow you to correlate any of the sensors because there's still a problem, and as soon as the computer sees a problem, it stops doing what it's doing and it won't finish its job. And in this case, hey, it still runs. It runs a little better than it did, but I'm sure it'll come back because it had the same exact codes come back within a 15-minute drive. So we know that, hey, drive it till the wheels fall off. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Cody Duncan says, when do you think you should rebuild a transmission? When it starts to have problems. Transmissions are so complex these days, you don't want to do like preventative maintenance other than changing the fluid and filter. You're not going to rebuild it just because it's so many miles or whatever, because modern transmissions are so complex. Even the pros, 1 out of every 3 isn't rebuilt correct. 33% of them isn't rebuilt correctly the first time they do it. So why tempt fate? It's like people say to me, when should I replace the alternator in my car? I say, when it stops working, because it might go for years and years and years and years. And generally, when you're going to buy an alternator, it's not new. It's going to be a remanufactured one, and your old one's still working, so just leave it until it goes. Matthew Meyer says, what do you think of a 95 Mercury Grand Marquis? Are they good cars? Well, they were in 95. If you don't mind something that gets bad gas mileage in town, but they can still get decent gas mileage on the highway, and those are Panther platforms, so they got solid frames, and they can run forever, right? Now, it's a 95, so you're talking about a 29-year-old car, right? That's an old car. Who knows what shape it's in now? Now, what you do when you look at those, if you're up north, look at the frame. If it's rotten, don't even get it. Run away. A rotten car's worth nothing. But it came from Texas or something, it could still be a pretty good car. You can still get parts and everything for them. Total Melancholy says, my battery gauge is reading a little high. Could it be caused by a bad alternator? Well, it can be caused by all kinds of things, and you don't want to guess. So what you do is numero uno, get a guy like me or buy your own battery alternator tester. You can get good ones on Amazon for like as little as $50 these days, right? First test the battery. If the battery is bad, your alternator is always going to charge too much to compensate for the weak battery. It could be just the battery, right? Now, let's say you test the battery. Battery's good. Then you test the alternator. If the alternator is putting out too much, then you know, voila, it's the alternator. But a lot of times, it's just the battery is weak, because a weak battery needs extra electricity. It'll show it's charging it more. And that's simple for any mechanic to test. Like I said, you can buy a $49 tester for batteries and alternators on Amazon. They work perfectly good, and you can test it yourself. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.